The film White Noise was released on Netflix in September of last year. It's about a train crashing, exploding, and burning toxic chemicals off into the atmosphere, creating a major health hazard for miles around, reflecting what just happened a few weeks ago in Ohio. White Noise was even filmed in the same area, just a few miles from Ground Zero in East Palestine. Some people will call this a coincidence, but these days, believing in coincidence can cost you your life. And there is more. Just 3 months before the train wreck, the city of East Palestine began adopting the MyID digital bracelet system into their local emergency services. Being touted as the ultimate ID system, MyID is a digital ID company dealing primarily with digital ID bracelets for the medical industry. Bracelets designed to make it easier for first responders to access your medical profile in the event of an unexpected emergency. And just a week before the crash, they began handing these bracelets out to all the residents of East Palestine. Also, 2 weeks before the crash, the CDC updated their page on vinyl chloride, removing their section on how it affects children and raising the safe exposure threshold. Neil Donald Walsh wrote, "There are no coincidences in the universe, only convergences of will, intent, and experience." Not only does the Ohio train crash appear to be a deliberate attack, it appears to potentially be a very deadly attack. 3 days after the train wreck, authorities called for a controlled release burn. Controlled in that they would initiate the spark that will burn all the chemicals and cargo together in a massive chemical fire, potentially putting millions of people's lives at risk. The vinyl chloride spill at Camp Lejeune was small in comparison to what happened this month in Ohio, but it still poisoned over 1 million people, and it took decades for the effects to materialize. A new federal lawsuit against Norfolk Southern alleges that 1.1 million pounds of vinyl chloride was spilled into the local environment. The vinyl chloride metabolite chloroethylene oxide attacks human DNA and can take years to start showing up as cancers and other disease. There is arguably no safe dose for exposure. Leading expert in the study of vinyl chloride, Dr. Julianne Baer, agrees and says that nobody should be drinking the local water. According to Dr. Baer, vinyl chloride gets transported into homes via the groundwater. She says it comes out of the water into the air, and that's really the major route of toxicity for the liver. It comes through the air. While some argue that burning it resolved these issues, that seems to be false. Dioxins are the deadly toxins behind Agent Orange and DDT. They are generated when chlorinated chemicals, like vinyl chloride, burn. In fact, the exact reaction that happened in East Palestine when they decided to burn vinyl chloride and PVC pellets together was arguably the most efficient and deadly way of dispersing dioxins into the environment, and could equate to being one of the biggest chemical weapons attacks in history. Some are saying that tens of millions of lives could now be at risk, and that number will keep growing so long as humanity dismisses these attacks as coincidence and continues to do nothing.
On February 9th, WHO Director Dr. Tedros revealed that there were, quote, several reports of mammals having been infected with H5N1 avian flu, commonly called the bird flu. Mammals such as minks, otters, foxes, and sea lions were said to have tested positive for the virus, reminding many of the discussions during early 2020 when COVID-19 was reported to originate at a market with a variety of live animals. The subtext here is that H5N1 is mutating and infecting more and more varieties of different animals aside from birds, and therefore the bird flu is growing more dangerous. However, according to the WHO's own statistics, there's only been one confirmed case of H5N1 for humans in the US, while Asia has had 240 lab-confirmed cases and 135 deaths, mainly in China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. But who knows if these confirmed case and death counts are even accurate? According to Tedros, quote, "At this moment, WHO assesses the risk to humans as low, because we have only seen rare and non-sustained transmission of H5N1 to and between humans. But we cannot assume that will remain the case, and we must prepare for any change in the status quo." So is the bird flu the next pandemic, or just a false alarm? One thing we know for sure is that WHO is planning a future vaccine rollout for H5N1. Tedros also stated in his speech, quote, "WHO is continuing to engage with manufacturers, meaning Big Pharma, to make sure that if needed, supplies of vaccines and antivirals would be available for global use." The same day WHO made their announcement of impending outbreak, the Biden administration proclaimed that bird flu vaccines for poultry are in the works. USDA spokesperson Mike Stepien said, quote, "The decision to proceed with vaccination is complex, and many factors must be considered before implementing a vaccination strategy," adding that the USDA is, quote, "soliciting input from many different industry stakeholders that would be impacted." So while the US is testing H5N1 shots on birds, the WHO is working with big pharma companies to ensure vaccines would be available for human use worldwide in case of a pandemic scenario. In China, the epicenter of bird flu infections for humans, they have already rolled out H5N1 poultry vaccines, just ahead of the US testing their own vaccines for birds. CBS News is reporting that, quote, "The Federal Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response also already maintains a program with vaccine makers to make and test small quantities of shots for humans that can be ramped up to large-scale production if needed." In other words, not only is the US developing H5N1 vaccines for birds, but they've already developed and tested bird flu vaccines for humans. Are US big pharma companies the ones that are going to work with the WHO to once again vaccinate the world during a new pandemic? With human transmission starting in China, history not only rhymes, but it repeats. Who knew? And the WHO knew about the bird flu.